All right, when you think of the Cold War, what comes to mind? Spies, nuclear missiles, the Berlin Wall, right? Well, what if I told you one of the most effective weapons in that fight wasn't a bomb or a satellite, but a book? Today, we're going to dive into the absolutely wild and very true story of the CIA's secret book club. So let's kick things off with this quote from a Polish dissident, Adam Michnik. He says, "I am convinced it was books that were victorious in the fight." Now think about that. Books, not bullets. Why? Well, because in a place where the government controls everything you see and hear, a book, that's a different story. It's a little pocket of freedom, of independent thought. It's like a window in a sealed room. And that brings us to the big question, the one we're going to unpack today. How on earth did millions of banned books, secretly paid for by the CIA, help fuel the revolution and topple an entire empire? It sounds like a spy movie, doesn't it? But it's all true. Okay, so Section 1, A War of Words. To really get why a book could be so powerful, you have to picture what it was like living in communist Poland at the time. The government didn't just run the country, they tried to run reality itself. Yeah, they basically created a government of words. If a fact was inconvenient, poof, it disappeared. History was whatever they said it was this week. You know, it's straight out of Orwell's 1984. So in a world like that, getting your hands on a real, uncensored book, that wasn't just reading. That was an act of rebellion. It was, quite literally, a weapon. And this underground world had a name. You gotta love this word, bibula. It literally means blotting paper, which is kind of perfect, because the paper they had to use for these illegal books was so cheap and crummy. This whole system was called the Second Circulation, and it was this massive secret network for sharing everything the government banned. We're talking poetry, political essays, and of course, George Orwell. Okay, so you've got this incredible underground movement, but who's running it? Every story like this needs a hero, and this one, well, he's about as unlikely as they come, a guy who pretty much became a folk legend. His name was Miroslav Hojecki, and get this, his day job? He was a nuclear physicist, but he ended up founding the biggest, most successful underground publishing house in the whole Soviet bloc, called NAWA. This guy went from splitting atoms to printing forbidden words. He was an absolute genius at it. And you have to understand where he was coming from. It was a pressure cooker. His parents were actual war heroes who fought the Nazis, and then they had to watch as their country was just handed over to another oppressive regime. Hojecki grew up seeing protests and strikes get violently shut down. For him, printing the truth wasn't just a choice. It felt like the only thing he could do. And this quote, it just tells you everything about his mindset. The police beat him. They threw him in this infamous prison, a really brutal place. He even went on a hunger strike, and they force-fed him. But when he talked about it, he said, "I thought that I was lucky." Why? Because he knew what his parents' generation went through. It just gives you this incredible sense of perspective on his sacrifice. Okay, but this brings us to a huge, looming question, a mystery at the heart of the whole story, really. I mean, just think about the logistics here. You can't just run down to the store and buy a printing press for your illegal operation. You need paper, tons of it. You need ink, radios, money, all while the secret police are breathing down your neck. So, where did it all come from? And here's the twist. The answer leads straight back to Washington, D.C. It was a top-secret, decades-long mission called the CIA Book Program. The idea was genius in its simplicity. Use books to punch holes in the Iron Curtain, to show millions of people trapped behind it that they weren't alone and the West hadn't forgotten them. So, how'd they do it? Well, you had two kinds of publishers. Inside Poland, you had the state-run presses churning out propaganda. But outside, in places like Paris, you had these émigré publishers printing the real stuff. And here's the kicker. The most famous one, a guy named Jerzy Godroyek, who ran a magazine called Kultura, was a CIA asset. His codename was QR Beretta. His entire operation secretly bankrolled by the US government. All right, so this is where our two stories, the gritty, on-the-ground resistance in Poland and the high-level spy games in Washington and Paris, finally merge into one. Then, in December 1981, the hammer came down. The Polish government declared martial law. Suddenly, there were tanks in the streets. Thousands of activists were arrested in the middle of the night. It was a brutal crackdown. Hojecki, our publisher hero, happened to be out of the country, so he was stuck in exile in Paris. But did he quit? No way. He just took on a new job title,
Minister for Smuggling. So the challenge becomes, how do you smuggle freedom past the Iron Curtain? You get really creative. I mean, these people were masters of disguise. Books and printing gear were hidden in food tins, in Tampax boxes, taped to people's bodies, hidden inside the sheet music for touring bands. The most legendary story? A copy of the Gulag Archipelago, a huge book about Soviet prison camps, was smuggled in, hidden inside a baby's diaper. You can't make this stuff up. And Tojecki, from his new base in Paris, was the guy connecting all the dots. He was the crucial link, working with those CIA-funded networks to pump a steady stream of supplies, presses, money, radios, back home to the people still on the ground, heroes like Helena Luchivo, who were risking everything to keep the resistance going.
Okay, so all of this, the secret printing, the smuggling, the decades of struggle, it was all leading somewhere. The final chapter was about to be written. The whole system was ready to crack. Fast forward to 1989. The communist government is basically broke. The economy's in the tank. People have had enough. So the regime makes a gamble. They agree to hold partially free elections, the first of their kind behind the Iron Curtain. But, and this is a huge but, they only gave the opposition, the Solidarity Movement, 2 months. Just 2 months to get ready. I mean, the matchup was a total joke. A real David versus Goliath situation. The communists had all the money, total control of the TV and radio, the entire state machine. Solidarity was starting from zero, but they had that underground network, and they had a secret flood of cash and supplies coming in from the outside. That included the paper and ink for thousands of election posters, including that now famous one with Gary Cooper from the movie High Noon, all paid for by the CIA.
So, after all that, what happened? How did this impossible election turn out? Well, there's just one number you need to remember: 99. That's right, 99. Solidarity took 99 of the 100 seats up for grabs in the Senate. It wasn't just a win, it was a total demolition, a political earthquake. And it was the beginning of the end for communist rule in Poland. It was the ultimate proof that this war had been won, not with bullets, but with books.
So that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole story is this incredible reminder that, at the end of the day, information really does want to be free. And if the weapons in that war of ideas were books smuggled in diapers and Tampax boxes, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the weapons of today?